A lot of people at this point probably think that I'm a huge, massive fanboy of Lycoris Recoil, and I can't criticize it at all. But I think with episode 5, I have some criticisms. I finally have some criticisms. Kurumi. Do they just want to make out Kurumi as being like the most useless person in this entire... I mean, Mika too. Mika and Kurumi, completely useless in this team. We have like super hacker walnut lady that's now with the team, and she literally is useless. Mika is completely useless, doesn't even look into what he's working on. How hard is it to discover that your client, who's supposed to be this billionaire that ran away to the US, is apparently building this huge skyscraper? How is it so difficult to look into that to find out if that's true or not? Yes, other hackers can hack and produce information, but come on. like how do they not know this guy was literally some guy that was in a hospital that they just threw into a wheelchair and put some VR stuff on? How did Kurumi not see that there was a signal going to that VR headset? It's a little bit frustrating that it seems like everything was laid out as a very simple thing that could have been discovered from the very beginning, but they didn't. Again, this thing's going to receive some sort of Wi-Fi or cellular signal to it. Again, Mika should be looking into his clients, who he's doing business for. And yet, everything was completely without their knowing. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, at least the writer should give them a little bit more credit. Give Kurumi and Mika a little more credit. I don't want them to be stuck on the sideline doing literally nothing until they get their own episode where they suddenly do something cool. That aside, I will also admit this episode, animation took a little bit of a dip. They still had a really cool one snippet scene, but for the most part, most of this episode was pretty, It was pretty on the action part. And especially the moment that Chisato first shows up, it had her like jumping in the air, and then it shifted to be behind her, and it just kind of looked like she was just gliding. It just was a little rough. That's fine. I don't expect every single episode to have insane, amazing animation. It does give you a fear that the quality is going to start going down from here, and I don't want that. I want the show to stay really solid going forward. But no, I think what episode 5 really did kind of reinforce into me personally is that, yes, this show I think is going to start going to the dark realm. Now, I think a lot of the discussion that's coming around Lycoris Recoil, at least in our Discord and people that have communicated to me directly, it's a lot of discussion that this show is going to go dark. And honestly, I was like, yeah, I think it's already technically dark. I mean, especially episode 4 at the very end kind of shows you that. Having a huge group of Lycorises that are just completely massacred. And I think it's always kind of been there. It's just always been in the background. The forefront has always been Chisato and Takina's relationship, and that's really bubbly. That's a lot of fun, and that's really heartwarming. But obviously, at the core, these are killers. And at the core, we also have this underlying story that Chisato is a genius at killing. So the question mark was what direction this could go. One being that something happens to Chisato and Takina goes nuts. Takina is like massive yandere or something like that. I don't necessarily see that. I do see her becoming very overprotective, but not necessarily into that realm where she suddenly becomes a psychopath. But yes, the other side of that is Takina becoming in danger and Chisato going non-lethal. Obviously, what they've kind of presented so far with this series is that Chisato is non-lethal and she doesn't want to take lives, and it keeps hitting on that. So obviously, eventually, we will have a moment where Chisato says, I can't do this anymore, and goes, well, technically in this episode, she did load non-lethal. Though the assumption is that she knew that this guy had some sort of vest on. So she knew that she could use non-lethal and it not penetrate his vest. So she used that impact to knock him out. But again, everything lines up to her eventually using non-lethal. And what I think episode 5 did is laid out its cards. Yoshimatsu, based on what he said in the previous episode, she's a genius at killing. He obviously wants to push her to be a killer. And so he's setting up all this stuff just to push her to that realm. And it kind of is solidified when going, well, why would somebody use a VR on some random guy in a wheelchair, set up this whole job just to get me to kill an assassin? And immediately Mika remembers Yoshi. Immediately cuts to Yoshi. It didn't really show his face. I'm going to assume that it's Yoshi because the voice is similar. He's got the same outfit on. He's got the pin. He has a female as well with him, and he does have an assistant that's a female. And then he confirms with his assistant that, yes, we're going to use that guy. And then it cuts to crazy guy that just wants to see the world burn, running over some poor girl, and then calling all these guys in to shoot the heck out of her. That's where I think it's already kind of confirming at this point It's no longer did the girls underground get crushed. It's now here's this girl and she literally just got executed in the streets. This is definitely going down the route of darkness. And I think what has been set up so far, and I'm still sticking with my previous theory, that Yoshi this entire time has been trying to funnel everybody to Chisato. And what that's going to do is now she has allies along on her side, and now if he puts them at threat, Chisato will be forced to have to finally use lethal. Now, the only thing that was really curious about this episode is that having this person that apparently is just a dummy in a wheelchair, and Yoshi was using this whole setup to be able to speak directly to her through this proxy, why did he question at the end? That was the only weird statement that he really says. Chisato confirms her standing. I don't want to take lives. I want to be somebody that helps people, just like the person that gave me this pendant. And Yoshi, through this guy, says if the Allen Institute helped you, then your life is... and then it cuts off. Now, that was the part that was making me wonder if it wasn't Yoshi. But again, I really do think it was him, despite the fact that they didn't want to show his face. Unless there's somebody else, the Allen Institute, that's trying to use her. That's perfectly logical. That could be that there's somebody else in the Institute, other than Yoshi, that knows that she's a genius at killing and wants to push her to kill. It's just you have two guys, same outfit, same pendant, same location, and both have a female assistant, and that's going to be a little difficult to tell between the two of them unless you actually see their faces. But that could be the case. So we have a theory that Yoshi wants to take care of Chisato, because again, my theory is that she is his daughter. And then you have this other guy that is trying to push her into being a killer. And maybe Yoshi's not the guy that is known as being the one that erases people, and it might be this other person, and Yoshi's trying to work against him. Besides all my complaints and the confusion around that, it was a solid episode. I don't think that... It's kind of like Summertime Rendering. When I watched episode 16 of Summertime Rendering, I was like, yeah, I kind of expected that nothing that they were going to give me after episode 15 was going to live up to it. And I had the same case with this. Nothing's going to live up to what kind of happened with episode 3 and episode 4. It was just really hitting hard, and I knew that eventually we're going to have a lull point. And it's not necessarily that it's a lull point, it's that I more think that this episode was a lot of setup. Episode 5 was set up for what's to come. Again, establishing that Chisato has this mechanical heart. It basically ties her in with the Allen Institute. Seemed to be implying this idea that her life is the Allen Institute. And him saying your life is ... it kind of lends itself to the idea that Chisato, no matter what, in the end, you're going to have to do what they say. And I think how that's going to come into play is that she's going to be forced into having to do what they say in fear of the fact that they will shut down her heart. Well, we'll just take back your heart. We gave you that. We gave you life. We'll take it back. So I think with the mechanical heart, they've pretty much set up that by the end of this series, somebody's going to have some remote saying, if you don't do this, I will press this button and your heart will stop. Which is really, really cheesy, but at the same time, this is something that's not norm. This is something that's only in this reality. This idea, this artificial heart that also doesn't hinder her, but makes her stronger, in effect. I think they're already hinting at the idea that this is what makes her so quick at moving. Maybe the idea that the heart can pump blood so quickly to certain limbs that allows her to move quickly, allows her to think really quickly. And yeah, technically a lot of the episode was focused on Takana being a little bit worried about the idea that Chisato, this person that she's now essentially formed a connection with, this is technically her first friend, technically her first somebody that is special to her. Yes, for everybody else, yes. Her first love. Yuri, everybody's going crazy with the Yuri thing. But yeah, this is like her first love. And so the thought that she doesn't have a heart, that essentially her physical nature has been compromised somehow, does affect her, does build curiosity in her, and does concern her. And yes, because story, she can't freaking get Chisato to tell her what's going on until the very end. Which is cute, because when they first finally have her sit down and converse with Chisato about it, she immediately puts her hand on it to check to see if it beats. And she's like, don't touch there. She's like, I'm just checking for the heartbeat. He's like, yeah, but don't grab my chest in public. But yeah, with all that said, I'm kind of hesitant for episode 6. I think after that final scene, and like I said, a lot of this set up to this idea that obviously somebody in the Institute is trying to push Chisato. And again, I don't know that it's Yoshi. It seems like it's trying to paint it as being him, but they're hiding his face. So obviously that's an indication that it might not be Yoshi. Somebody at the Institute, whether it's Yoshi or somebody else, is trying to push Chisato to be a killer. A killer for them specifically. So I'll be very curious to see how it goes going forward. And I think the way that's going to lay out is having this crazy guy, again, put somebody within Lycoris in danger, and probably most likely Takina specifically. I give a lot of respect in the idea that Jin was technically the first person to really push Lycoris. Didn't push Chisato very far, but at least Takina. Takina was cornered, Mizuki was cornered, and yes, technically Kurumi and Mika were cornered too because they apparently had no clue what was going on. So we're finally starting to see threats that are really going to put them in danger. And having this guy that is willing to bring together a band of people that just want to see everything burn is going to hopefully create something interesting. Honestly, episode 6 being almost the midpoint of the show, I can possibly see them getting into that stuff already. Maybe spin a few episodes to really push Chisato. But I don't think it's going to get too dark because I think that's a little bit too early, unless they have another plot line they want to get into going forward. We could have this be the point where we're pushing Chisato to be a killer in this middle point, and then the final part of the story is an Allen Institute versus the DA or the Lycoris storyline going on, because I think that's still going to be something in the future. Anyways, that's my thoughts on episode 5 of Lycoris Recoil. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, make sure to hit that like button down below. Comment. Let me know. Do you think next episode going full dark? Are we going to push it already? I really like the fact that this is an original. I love that I don't have to worry about spoilers. I can check the comments and not have to worry about it. But additionally, if you're not already, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you get all my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you want to support the channel more, we have a Patreon link, a tips link, and a super thanks button down below. I definitely appreciate everybody that does. And y'all take care.